Welcome back, transmission enthusiast. We have another Fix It Again victim here behind us. This is a 48RE that come in from down in Florida. Was already previously built, so supposed to have some good parts in it, some good Sonex stuff. So that's good. That'll help save the customer some money when upgrading to one of my builds. So we're going to dive into this thing and see exactly what's inside of it and what we're going to change to make this thing handle a good 800 horsepower. We got some good steels here in the overdrive section, but paired up with some clutches that I'm not a fan of. These are the choline steels here, like what I would normally run, but these are red Alto clutches. I'm not a big fan of the red Alto clutch, especially with a choline material, because as you see, the choline wants to transfer the heat to the red Alto clutch, and in my opinion, these things do not handle heat very well at all. So these are definitely going to go. This overdrive brake is another big no-no. I never run a stepped machine backing plate like that. This is like an OEM style one. You can see that the step is very, very thin in it, and those are very common for cracking and breaking, so that will go as well. So far, I am seeing that we have a Sonex intermediate shaft in here, so that's some good signs there. But it's looking like it's going to be a stock output, so it's kind of weird for an 800 horsepower build that they would put a Sonex billet input in it. I'm pretty sure. I'll confirm when I get that out. But Sonex intermediate and then a stock output. But I've heard of guys doing that. It's kind of like an older school mindset with it. Some of the reason they do that is because they say it's cheaper to replace the output shaft than the intermediate shaft, which is true because you don't have to pull the whole transmission out and apart. You can just pull the overdrive housing off. But I have seen stock intermediates live even in 900 or 1,000 horsepower trucks. So I have not seen a stock output 4-wheel drive, 48 or 47, unless it's an RH, live in anything really much above 700-800. So kind of weird, but is what it is. We'll get her fixed up right. I'm wondering if I'm going to see a trend in this whole transmission of red Altos and choline steels. If I'm being perfectly honest, the cholines and the red Altos are probably perfectly fine for the overdrive. These really don't have a lot of load. As long as you have your overdrive spacing correct, you normally don't ever have any problems out of these. You can really put just about whatever you want to in here, but I generally run like the yellow-red or the yellow board clutch or a graphite GPZ, but really probably put anything in here, so probably leave this one up to the customer what he wants to do. So we will continue on tearing her down. Today's video is sponsored by Skyline Chili. Not really, but Skyline is the best chili in around. So if you're ever in the Cincinnati area, come see me and I'll take you to Skyline Chili. It's the best there is, no debate. Got our pump out and apart here. Several important things to check. First off, you need to make sure that the gear pocket is not scarred anywhere, and this one looks really nice, so we know we're in good shape there. I always kind of look at the bushing too, even though we're going to replace it, just to, if there's any hints of anything that might be going wrong, sometimes you can find it in little things like that. So don't just go and slam these things apart and knock the bushings and stuff out of them without paying attention to them, because sometimes they'll leave little clues for you. And then always want to check your tip to lobe clearance on your pump gear. This is a good 48 pump gear. 2 to 7 thousandths is what you're looking for. This one's right at 3, so nice and healthy. And then we always stick our pick down in, and you want to put a pick in that hole there, the one that is dead center there, and you want to make sure that you can get a pick in it, because that is the stator tube, and if that thing twists, it'll back up converter charge pressure, and you'll have all kinds of issues, and the thing will want to stall out on you when you put it in gear. So always a good idea to check that, especially if you're going to reuse the customer's input shaft, because we need to make sure that thing's not twisted. If that is, and when I say twisted, I don't mean twisting the splines, I mean like out around. If this thing is not running true, it can get stuck in this bushing here and spin that stator tube. So definitely something that you always want to look at there. everything checks out in the pump here. This is a really nice, good, healthy one. And on these 48s, you always want to verify too that it is a 48 pump. Easiest way to do that is that part number right there. And it has this flat boss area up here towards the top of the pump vent. Only the 48s have that. On the stator support, only the 48s have that sealing ring. So we got a good 48 pump here. We're good to go. See some inclination of our first failure point in here. This hot spot around the drum here is generally a pretty good indication that we have a second gear band issue. And from the way it looks like they're running a rigid band on this, which I generally will never use in a street-driven application. But we'll get our part and see what we got here. Just as I suspected, we have a burnt second gear band and a very unhappy direct drum. This is exactly why I don't like rigid bands on street-driven stuff. The rigid band is generally too rigid. It doesn't conform 100% to the drum, and you end up with problems like this. Now, a lot of this could be factor from the valve body, the servo setup, so we won't know exactly until we get into all that stuff, but generally I don't like these for that reason. Now, with that being said, there's going to be somebody in the comments here that's going to say, you know, hey, I got one that's been on there for 300,000 miles. Yes, I have seen them work successfully, don't get me wrong. For me, as long as you're running under 210 psi of line pressure, the risk is not worth the reward. It's a flex band for me. This drum looks pretty bad, but I can't feel any of it with my finger, so there's a good chance that I might be able to resurface this and save it. If I can, then I will do so. If not, then we'll have to stick a new direct drum in this thing. Our reoccurring theme of choline steels and red alto clutches continues on. The direct clutch back here, and this is just another example of why I'm not a fan of these clutches. This is the way that the direct clutch pack works in general. The apply piston applies up against the reaction plate, and so the last clutches to basically stop slipping are the ones towards the top of the pack. That's why generally the ones at the bottom always look better than the ones at the top. And as you can see, this thing slips pretty bad up here at the top. These clutches just don't have much holding power, in my opinion. You can see all the heat that they're putting into the cholines here. This thing's very unhappy. Another thing that was not giving these things much chance at life either is this itty bitty thin little reaction plate. I try to always run a full thickness reaction plate in these things anytime that I can, because that is a giant heat sink. So if these things do start to generate a little heat from the clutch pack applying, this thick reaction plate will act as a heat sink. In some applications, I'll actually double up the top steel here. I'll put two steels together to have a heat sink here, and you would be surprised at the tremendous difference that that can make. But these are definitely all going to go. We're going to put GPZ clutches in here and a full thickness reaction plate, and with good valve body, good line pressure, and a good 2-3 shift timing, we shouldn't have this problem ever again. Wow, found some carnage that I was not expecting to see. This is something that is not normal at all, but this forward clutch hub has rubbed up against the sun shell in here severely, to the point where it is almost exposing the snap ring. About to snap this thing right out of there. Boys, we have a wild one here. Where's that? This carnage over here is not from in play, because I got to looking at it and I said, man, why is there no rubbing on this side of the clutch hub, but over here is where all the rubbing is? Well, I got to looking, and the input shaft is drawing itself through the forward clutch hub here, slash drum, whatever you want to call it. People call it many different things. That, I've only seen that, I've never seen it in person. I've only seen that on the internet. So today we have a new thing here. We have seen something that has previously only been seen by me on the internet here. So I'm going to have to knock this out the other way and hope that this expensive Sonex input shaft isn't bad for the guy. Now, why would this do this? Two things. One, some of these older Sonex input shafts, the teeth on these things are really sharp, but even with how sharp they are, it still shouldn't draw through that like it did. Even if this was a constant pressure valve body where it's just every time you were dropping in gear, it was getting hit with full pressure, it still shouldn't do that. So this had to be of some sort of defective material to cause that. But that's a wild one there for us. On top of that, we have some very unhappy forward clutches here. Your forward clutches should never look like that. And this time it is not the Alto's fault, because the truth being told, you could put about any forward clutch in the front because they are not a shifting clutch pack. So if you're burning up forward clutches, you have something going on with your valve body, or in this case, see that little piece of lip seal right there? That is from the forward apply piston. So this thing was losing a ton of line pressure. Either way, this is the result of it. So we got some fixing here to do to fix it again. No real surprises here in the gear train. Everything looks pretty good. Thrust washers obviously need to be replaced. Man, I'm torn on this sun shell here. It has a lot of spots in that thing where metal has made contact. Realistically, it's probably fine. The biggest problem I have with it is because that thing was cocked. It was cocking the direct drum too. I don't know if you can see it there, but it was trying to eat into the lugs here on the sun shell. I just don't want a customer, if it'll focus, maybe not. I just don't want the customer to have a stupid issue down the road. I don't want this thing to keep making metal and create a problem. So I think we're going to have to replace it. It's not a very expensive part, so need to replace it so that way we don't have any problems with this thing down the road. Not worth it. The low reverse drum is in pretty good shape. Ooh, looks nice. Inside race where it rides on the overdrive piston support looks pretty good. Nothing scary there. And right away I thought this band was good, but it is not. It has been burning the corners of the lining off. This is a problem with aftermarket bands. You have to really be careful with them. You got to really know what you're looking for. I will reuse an OEM band for the low reverse anytime I can if it's in good shape, because you have to be careful with aftermarket low reverse bands. Sometimes I'll have to pick through 2 or 3 bands before I find a good one. And what it is sometimes they're just too tight. They're just too tight on the drum, and even with no amount of adjustment on them, they're just riding tight on that drum, and it'll lead to stuff like that. So we'll have to replace that one. The drum looks good, and then we can get inside here, get the valve body out, and do our final assessment. We have an interesting array of servos in here. We have a stock front servo, which that should be changed to a billet one. In my opinion, at least a billet servo cover no matter what, and a full billet servo on anything where you're going to increase the line pressure really much at all. We got a 4.2 billet lever. I like to run a 3/8, so we're going to change that out. We have a Sonex accumulator. It's perfectly fine, nothing wrong with that. We do have a billet rear servo. Not the kind that I really like with the dual sealing ring surface, but at least it is a billet servo. So the valve body here is just your basic old Transgo kit valve body, and I can tell that by the white painted boost valve spring, some of the other springs, that separator plate, the way that is machined, and the type of galvanized color it is. Pretty good indication that it's just a Transgo kit, like 95% of the stuff that's out there. So we know what we got now, so I'm going to get this thing all cleaned up and get it put back together and get him a nice new Logan built unit so he can go back to having some fun and working his truck. One last interesting discovery I found here. So recently I had put out a short about not putting trans temp sensors in the front servo, accumulator port, or the rear servo, because say in the front servo port here, you're only reading the oil in third gear. The accumulator port is supposed to be for your line pressure sensor, but if you did put it here, you would at least get trans temp in all forward gears, but in the rear back here, you would only get proper trans temp in manual first or reverse, because that's the only time that any of these have oil. But I just found a problem with this one. I was trying to depress the front servo cover to get this apart, and it wouldn't do it. And I realized this sensor is too long. And so when this thing is screwed all the way in, it actually had this front servo spring and coil bind. Now this was a stock servo spring, so if you had maybe like the Transgo style spring or the gear end spring I had in here, maybe it wouldn't actually be a problem there. But this thing was actually hanging up the spring. So what that was doing is that is totally screwing up your second gear timing. If that spring's coil bound, you're not going to be able to put as much pressure on the pin to keep the band applied, and then is going to change how quickly it releases. So something is a simple, just honest mistake. Most people aren't in-depth transmission people when they put these, trans temp gauges in their truck, and they just find an open port and stick it in there. But in this case, this was actually probably a lot of the reason why that second gear band looked as ugly as it did, along with the things that I talked about earlier in the video. So the proper place for this is always in the pan. You don't want to put it anywhere else, because you want to know what is in this pan. That's going to tell you the fluid has gone through from the converter, through your cooler, back to the transmission case here, lubricated the entire transmission, and then is in the pan. If that temperature is below 200 degrees, 210 degrees, you know you're good. If you're getting your reading from anywhere else, it's not an accurate reading. You don't know exactly what's going on in your transmission. All right, so we got this one all wrapped up and back together. Customer requested this purple illusion, or violent illusion, something like that. Pretty good looking color. We gave him a used deep pan, helped him save a little bit of money there. Did a used 23 spline billet output shaft, since this was already a used transmission to start with there. Customer didn't mind, and if I could save somebody some money, I always try to do that. So this one is good to go. It's going to head back out to Florida, where it's going to go into a truck to give them a new life of service. So that's going to do it for this episode of Fix It Again. If you guys like this a little bit longer format of content on these transmission repairs and rebuilds and stuff, we can get more in depth than that. I just try to keep it to where you guys are actually going to want to watch these videos, so that way you actually get something out of it. But if you guys want to see even more in-depth stuff, drop a comment below. Let me know. If you are not already subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that. It is absolutely free and notifies you anytime I post a new video. So that's going to do it for this one, guys. Thanks for watching. Fix It Again.